The June 19th Taiwan Strait Confrontation. Prologue to Provocation. In the quiet early hours of June 19, 2025, at precisely 2:43 a.m. local time, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense identified a large, coordinated radar signature originating from the west, not an anomaly, but a deliberate and highly organized military maneuver. What began as an alert from radar stations in Hualien quickly escalated into the most significant military standoff in the Pacific since the Taiwan Strait crisis of 1996. 50 Chinese military aircraft, including J-16 strike fighters, J-10C interceptors, 4 KJ-500 AWACS aircraft, 2 Y-8GX electronic warfare platforms, and, most alarmingly, 8 J-20 stealth fighters, crossed into the eastern quadrant of Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ. Unlike previous intrusions which were largely symbolic or geared toward psychological pressure, this was a show of force structured with combat intent. What followed was not a skirmish nor a drill. It was a silent, high-stakes ballet of modern military power, a convergence of stealth, electronic warfare, cyber operations, and inter-service coordination that teetered on the edge of open conflict. The U.S. Navy's USS Ronald Reagan, stationed 340 nautical miles southeast of Taiwan in the Philippine Sea, responded with stunning speed. Within 4 minutes of receiving flash traffic at 3:19 a.m., 12 F-35C stealth fighters were airborne under full combat alert. No shots were fired. But that night, war came closer than it has in decades. A tactical blueprint. Taiwanese radar tracked multiple aircraft launching from airbases in China's Fujian province. But what made this event distinct was the precision and structure of the formation. 24 J-16 multi-role strike fighters flew in coordinated squadrons, each loaded with YJ-83K anti-ship missiles and PL-15 long-range air-to-air missiles. Their target profiles were unmistakable: maritime strike, aimed at naval groups and airborne tankers. 12 J-10C air superiority fighters formed an outer protective shell. Their role was to secure air dominance and intercept any immediate threat to the main strike group. 8 J-20 stealth fighters, configured in a hunter-killer pattern, were tasked with eliminating early warning systems and disrupting enemy command and control infrastructure. They maintained EMCAN emissions control, discipline throughout the engagement. 4 KJ-500 early warning aircraft circled at a standoff range, providing real-time data and coordination across Chinese assets. Their rotating AESA radars were critical in tracking American and Taiwanese response formations. 2 Y-8GX electronic warfare aircraft assumed a less visible but equally critical role, suppressing radar and jamming fire control systems. Their payloads included Type 726 jamming pods and communications disruption suites. The Chinese formation, 24 nautical miles east of Taiwan's baseline, was deliberate and disciplined, the product of months of training and simulated engagements. F-35CS and real-time command. At 3:19 a.m., the USS Ronald Reagan received confirmed radar data and communications intercepts via Pacific Fleet Command. The response was immediate. 12 F-35C Lightning II aircraft were launched under full combat protocols by 3:23 a.m. The carrier air wing, trained for rapid deployment, was airborne within 4 minutes. These fighters were not configured for training. They were fully armed and pre-briefed for potential engagement. 3 E-2D Advanced Hawkeye command and control aircraft, flying in coordination, provided networked airborne control, feeding real-time targeting and threat data to the F-35CS through secure data links. U.S. Air Force KC-135 and Navy MQ-25 Stingray refuelers repositioned south of the engagement zone to enable extended loiter and combat readiness. By 3:45 a.m., 2 of the most advanced air forces in the world were operating within 50 nautical miles of one another, close enough for visual range contact, well within missile reach. Electromagnetic dominance. What followed was not a kinetic exchange, but an invisible, layered war fought across electromagnetic, cyber, and space domains. Chinese electronic warfare platforms began emitting radar jamming signals at 3:25 a.m., focused on fire control and navigation frequencies used by the F-35C. Okinawan monitoring stations detected EM bursts exceeding 10,000 watts, enough to disrupt civilian GPS over northern Taiwan. US F-35CS deployed AI-driven Barracuda electronic countermeasures, which generated false radar echoes, phantom squadrons, intended to overwhelm and confuse Chinese radar operators. At several points, Chinese AWACS believed they were facing 24 American fighters rather than 12. GPS spoofing attacks by Chinese cyber units were detected by Taiwan's Joint Cyber Defense Command. These false navigation signals aimed to misdirect both aircraft and weapon systems, a technique rarely seen in military applications. Space-based jamming was confirmed at 3:31 a.m., with U.S. Space Force detecting microwave emissions targeting GPS satellites. Precision navigation was compromised for 18 minutes, forcing both sides to revert to inertial systems. Rules of engagement tested. The climax occurred between 3:45 and 3:52 a.m., when radar locks occurred between opposing fighters. At 3:47 a.m., 3 F-35CS were locked on by J-20s using PL-15 targeting radars. Simultaneously, American pilots achieved radar locks on multiple Chinese aircraft. Onboard systems entered weapons-free readiness. At least 2 AIM-120D missiles were armed aboard U.S. fighters. Taiwanese F-16 Versus, flying from Hualien and Taoyuan bases, attempted to flank the Chinese formation but were electronically blocked by Chinese jamming corridors. J-16 strike fighters detected the inbound U.S. formation using infrared tracking and began arming YJ-83 anti-ship missiles. Authorization for defensive weapons use had been granted by Beijing's Southern Theater Command. The standoff teetered on the edge of disaster. U.S. rules of engagement, outlined in Pacific Fleet Standing Order 25, consider hostile radar lock a trigger for defensive action. Weapons were seconds from deployment, but then, an unexpected communication pathway activated. Deconfliction on the edge. Unknown to most of the public, the November 2022 Biden-Xi summit had resulted in the creation of the Pacific Protocols, a crisis communication framework designed to prevent accidental warfare. At 3:52 a.m., secure military-to-military communications between the USS Ronald Reagan and PLA Navy Southern Theater Command were activated. Both parties acknowledged radar locks, agreed on immediate stand-down, and began phased withdrawal within 5 minutes. All aircraft returned to respective operating areas by 4:15 a.m. A war had been narrowly avoided, not by luck, but by the thin wire of diplomatic foresight. How the U.S. knew in advance. This confrontation did not catch the U.S. off guard. NRO satellite NROL-71, a classified synthetic aperture radar platform in geosynchronous orbit, began tracking Chinese sortie preparations 18 hours prior. Aircraft dispersal patterns, hangar activity, and radar emissions at Longtian and Huiyin bases were identified as anomalous. RC-135V Rivet joint aircraft from Kadena Air Base intercepted command communications beginning at 1:15 a.m. on June 19. The operation was identified by its code name, Thunder Dragon Exercise. USS Connecticut, a Seawolf-class submarine operating in the Luzon Strait, tracked 2 Type 093 Chinese submarines repositioning east of Taiwan. Chinese naval units were clearly postured for a broader contingency. RQ-4 Global Hawk UAVs provided high-altitude real-time surveillance, relaying positional data every 2.3 seconds to Pacific Command. AI systems under Project Maven processed over 12,000 data points in under 90 minutes. At 2:51 a.m., the system estimated a 23% likelihood of kinetic confrontation, enough to activate DEFCON 3-level monitoring protocols across Indo-Pacific. China's strategic calculus. Several converging factors explain China's sudden escalation. Taiwan-Philippines military agreement, signed June 15th, it created joint patrol frameworks and a Taiwanese liaison office at Subic Bay, a direct affront to China's South China Sea territorial claims. U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. An $8.5 billion package in May 2025 included 200 HIMARS systems and advanced radar arrays, the largest since the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979. Semiconductor sanctions. U.S. export controls imposed in March 2025 effectively blocked Chinese access to EUV lithography tools, stalling its chip ambitions. Internal CCP politics. Xi Jinping, under pressure from hardliners, needed to project strength after recent economic stagnation and diplomatic isolation. Strategic timing. PLA doctrine identifies 2027 to 2030 as its peak military readiness window before demographic decline reduces manpower advantages. Beijing faces a narrowing timeline. The U.S. response: military, diplomatic, economic. The U.S. reacted swiftly across multiple axes. Military. Operation Hercules sent the USS Antietam through the Taiwan Strait on June 19. The USS Michigan, a guided missile submarine, was deployed to the South China Sea, within striking range of Chinese naval infrastructure. Air power surge. 12 F-22 Raptors redeployed to Kadena within 72 hours, representing unmatched air superiority. Diplomatic. Secretary Blinken used the crisis hotline within 6 hours. A 47-minute conversation with China's foreign minister clarified red lines and urged restraint. Economic pressure. On June 22, sanctions were announced against 12 Chinese aerospace firms, cutting off Western avionics and radar components. Alliance signaling. Japan expanded ADIZ patrols, and Australia deployed P-8 Poseidons to the Philippines under joint maritime surveillance agreements. Lessons from the brink. June 19, 2025, may be remembered as a turning point in modern military history. Stealth is now normalized. The routine deployment of fifth-generation fighters compresses decision windows. Future engagements will occur at shorter ranges and faster speeds. Electronic warfare is a frontline weapon. Jamming, spoofing, and cyber operations blurred the lines between harassment and combat. AI is the new analyst. Machine learning systems proved decisive in preemptive intelligence, not just in hindsight. Crisis communication matters. Without the Pacific protocols, a full-scale war may have unfolded due to a radar lock. The escalation ladder is shorter. Modern warfare moves in seconds. Strategic deterrence must now account for automated kill chains and split-second ROE interpretation. A dangerous balance. This confrontation reset the Pacific balance. It proved that advanced militaries can engage in limited confrontation without triggering full war, but only barely. China tested U.S. response speeds and command cohesion. The U.S. demonstrated it could mobilize with precision and restraint. The uneasy conclusion. Both sides now believe limited, high-tech confrontations are survivable, even useful. This belief will lead to more incidents. Whether future confrontations will be managed as carefully remains uncertain. The real question isn't if they'll occur, it's whether the systems preventing war will keep working, every time.